Hello, welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports and another edition of What is in Our Stand today. I'm your host, George, and I'm not only the owner, but I'm also the lead mechanic. And I also do product reviews and many other things. But what we have in our stand today is a gentleman's bike who wants me to install a Pioneer power meter. And so let's talk about power meters briefly. And in the last 5 years, there's just been this massive explosion of all the different types of options for power meters, and that competition has driven the price down. So back in 2003, when I first started using a power meter, I was using a power tap, and that was in the rear wheel. And there's been, and Power Tap has come up with other things. They've got pedals now, and they've got chain rings now. So they've done quite a few things to keep themselves viable. But the 800-pound gorilla was the SRM, and I eventually purchased one in 2009. Funny thing is I sold two of my Power Tap wheel assemblies for a SRM. And I've had that since 2009, so that's about 10 years now. We're in 2019, and it's arguably the gold standard. A lot of manufacturers still will benchmark the SRM. It's a German manufacturer, and it just never has fallouts. It just never has any issues. However, I've not been using it as much lately because I have been using a set of pedals from Cervelo, and they're called Axioma power meter pedals, and they're very practical. I can move them from bike to bike at a whim. I want to ride this bike, I just switch the pedals out. No special tools, no special torque necessary. And I can also put them on my tandem. And so this Saturday, my tandem partner and I are doing a 200-mile event with 17,000 feet of climbing. It's very good to have, it's very useful to have a power meter as you're doing, a 13-hour event. And so I can just take the pedals off my road bike, put them on my tandem, and I've got power. So that's a huge benefit to having a pedal power meter system. Garmin has a power meter for pedals, and so does PowerTap, as I mentioned before. I just prefer these Axioma pedals. They're just super reliable, and I've had them over a year, over 10,000 miles, and over 1 million feet of climbing. So they are very, very solid pedals. Okay, let's get back to what we're doing today. We are working on this Cervelo P2, and as I mentioned, we're going to put a power meter. That's why that crankset is removed. And just as a funny aside, this gentleman was out riding, his front derailleur cable snapped, and so he had to shim it so that he could keep the chain in the big ring, because when there's no tension on the cable, this will relax down to the default position is a small chain ring. The chain is worn, so we'll replace that. And as I mentioned, the front derailleur cable has snapped. Now, he had his 7900 Dura 7900 crankset, which is not compatible with Pioneer. And Pioneer is one of these companies where you take your crankset off and ship it to them, and they will install a power meter on your crankset, which is kind of nice. 4i also does that. And if we look at the tools are pretty basic. We're just going to need a torque wrench to put the crankset back on. Then there is, and now you can see what that crank arm looks like with the power meter on there. And this, of course, has an issue because not all frames will have enough clearance to get that crank arm to clear the chainstays. So that's important to consult either with Pioneer or with your local bike shop. This is the plug that, or the tool that we'll use to put that crank arm on, and then the two pinch bolts are torqued with that wrench there. A little bit of grease, always everything should be greased when you have an opportunity to. The alcohol, so that we can clean the frame and put the magnets on. Here's a template for it. Once everything's on, we are going to pair it up with his head unit. Okay, So I appreciate all of you that have been coming onto the channel. If you would, um, if you like what you are seeing and you'd like to subscribe, please do that and then hit the little bell so you have a notification every time I post something new. In the meantime, have a great ride and we will see you on the road.